Okay, so hi, hello. I am Smug, or also known as HG Sensostry. We've been through this before. If you were here for the thing with Rachel Reads, where she reviewed my book, then this is also of a similar note because I commissioned Lou Reading Things and Rachel Reads to both read my book and give the first in the series a shot. If you want to go and watch what Rachel said about it, the video will be up on the VOD channel where this is being posted. But I recently knew that this went live, so I wanted to record it now. I actually haven't gone through any of it at all. I don't know what she's going to say. And unlike Rachel's, where it was split into three books and I got about, I think, 10 to 15 minutes, this one is almost half an hour of just talking about my book. It hasn't come out for long. I think this came out, what's the date today? Yeah, so it came out yesterday. Probably yesterday while I was working. So really, it's been out for less than a day. So I wanted to get ahead of the curve, give this a watch, and see what I almost said Rachel instinctively. Sorry, Lou said. I really like Lou's stuff. I don't watch a lot of book. That's kind of a lie. I watched all the stuff from Cindy, reading with Cindy. But I keep forgetting these channels and how they format reading through Sarah J. Maas's awful works. Then I've watched Rachel, I've watched Carrie Can Read going through Sarah J. Maas, which seems to be that's where they net all the views because that was very infamous that people want to watch videos about that. And I think Lou has also done it. I can't remember, but I like having Lou on in the background while I'm doing stuff. There's actually been a bit of a backlog because I've started work on a summer job, so I do need to catch up on what Lou has been reading. But for now, we're going to go and give this video a watch and see what she says. I'm already betting the birth scene will be brought up because that is the bane of my to-be writing career. But yeah, anyway, thank you very much, Lou, for giving my work a shot, and I'm looking forward to what gets said in this video.
Video with wet hair before. Once a guy told me that it was unprofessional to walk into places with
Sorry, I think... God. I'm so professional. Let me turn this up a little bit.
my hair wet because it gives the idea that I just had sex.
Intriguing.
Uh,
Also, if you want to watch this without commentary, you can go find it on her channel.
Right? Hi, hello, how's it going?
You can go find it on her channel because
I
I'm
am
going to
here
commentate a lot of
about
this.
book, because that's something I do sometimes. I sit here.
What the hell,
about books.
really? That's
Yay.
insane.
If my general demeanor seems like I don't have much energy, that's because I don't. I had a shit week, like a terrible week. All because of my brain, because I have ADHD, and so people are like,
rough.
"Oh, having ADHD is so trendy now." Yeah, it's trendy until it fucks your entire life. I'm trying to be more positive about it, but it's difficult. Ha, positive.
I knew that was coming,
It's
bro. Why would you make that joke?
That makes sense with the book that we're going to talk about today, I promise. Today, I am here to talk about a book called The Sharpened Fangs of Lupine Spirit. Full disclosure, this was a book that was commissioned to me to give a full, honest review. Thank you again for commissioning me. If you're interested in commissioning me to do a full honest review of your work as well, you can check my Ko-fi in the description below. But this was a book that was commissioned to me and is a book that generally I wouldn't search for or I wouldn't reach for. So I'm really glad that I was commissioned to do it because it really gave me the opportunity to sort of spread my reach a little bit more.
Hell yeah.
Especially
Sorry, moving my mic.
When I read this book, I really wasn't reading much, and so having this thing to read that is very out of the box and very out of my usual reading style thing was very, very interesting. So I had a blast doing this commission. So The Sharpened Fangs of Lupine Spirit is a book that was written by author
Let's see if she says it.
Sensostry.
Sensostry. Sansostry, not Sansostry, but you know what? I think Rachel missed the letter, said Sansotry or something, so I think that's closer. Lou wins. Lou wins on saying my name.
I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I am so sorry if I am not. But
the pause was amazing for that. Okay, especially you're forgiven.
Because I don't really respect the English language.
Damn.
So let's read the synopsis together so I can begin to talk about it.
Okay.
Shall we? In the snowy recesses of the clan of the Great Lupine, buffeted by the chilling wings and unrelenting snow, live Corsair and Ragna Sedrid, skilled tournament fighters and sons of the prestigious Winter Baron. When war's thunderous howl sounds in the east, the brothers are ripped away from their lives of warmth and peace and marched into the chaos of combat in the name of their people. The only comfort they carry is vested in each other's and their steeds, the stoic Harengoth and loyal Quickpaw. But the bloodshed of warfare is the least harrowing trial facing the Cedric brothers. Malevolent.
I have to pause it. I just, I've said it before. I can't. I really, like, we've been over with Rachel's work. Like, it's not perfect. I think it's really good. That's it's kind of fueled by the sentimental value of it being my first sort of debut. But I haven't got anyone that's turned around and said, "Hey, this is awful. I hate it. Like, you should stop being a writer." I've had people for the most part, to have esteemed people like this turn around and say this is pretty damn good for your debut, here and there needs work, but ultimately it's a good read. Like, that means a lot, and it tells me that I'm on good track to improve my craft, right? So I think, right, what I wrote in there, excluding the birthing scene, was genuinely good, and I think it was a good starting point for the whole series. And what I'm writing right now, I'm working on the third book. I really enjoy it. I'm reading through it. I'm like, damn, like this. I can tell I've gotten better, and I think people are going to enjoy this. But there's just something about hearing it back that I'm sitting there and I'm cringing. I'm not cringing because I think it's bad. I'm just like, I don't know. I'm weird about hearing my own work read aloud. In the same way, I'm weird about hearing my voice or seeing me. Like, I used to do acting. So if there was ever like a scene I acted in, I would have hated to watch it. Not necessarily because it's bad, just because I don't know. It's weird. I'm weird about that. But anyway.
Wreaks havoc out of sight. Figures speak of conspiracy in the shadows, and a single will, so determined to fulfill its duty, inflicts atrocity and malice of incomprehensible proportions. Vos Dremar hosts many more evils than the two wolves can begin to fathom, and their journey is just beginning. What did I think about this book? Like I said, this is a book that I wouldn't necessarily reach for, and I think that this is a book that is written with a younger audience in mind. Definitely not the type of thing that I would naturally be inclined to read.
Okay.
Most of you know that I'm a huge fan of purple prose, and I love books that are just, romantic, and I love romance, and I love those types of books. And I'm a romance hoe. That's what I'm trying to say. I love when my romance has politics, but what I read the most is romance.
The fuck's
Can you guys hear that?
Yeah.
So here's a funny story. My neighbor's cat is in love with my cat. His name is Heathcliff, like the one guy in Wuthering Heights. And he keeps meowing at my cat every single day. And my cat is just like not interested. She's spayed and he's neutered, so I'm not sure why he's so in love with her. But he keeps meowing at her, and she keeps looking at him with such disdain. Eventually, she will hiss at him to stop, and he will for a second, and then he will start again because he's completely in love with my cat.
You gotta appreciate it. He's dedicated. He's determined.
I love you too, baby. I have been a witness to this torrid one-sided love affair for a while now. It's been very funny to watch.
One-sided love affair.
Was that I am naturally inclined to books that focus a lot on the romance, and I like when the books talk about the politics of stuff. But usually when I go for fantasy, I go for fantasy romance, and this is not. However, this is a book that I think would be very interesting for a boy age 13 to 14 to read.
That's a good age range.
Not only because of the themes that the book explores, but also because of the writing. When I was reading it, Rachel and I read this book almost at the same time. And one thing that this book reads to me, at first I thought it read like furry stuff, which...
Why you should have just shot me in the head for no, because that's what it is, right? The animal people, but also I fucking hate that so much. That's like being shot in the chest. Okay, go on.
It's really not my cup of tea. But then Rachel said something that really clicked to me. It reads like a Disney movie, like Kung Fu Panda. It reads like Kung Fu Panda.
Okay.
Finally, a worthy opponent. Our battle will be legendary.
It's just like that, like anthropomorphic animals that are... Oh, she's gonna hiss. Yep.
He's so
Oh boy.
desperate.
Oh boy. No. So she lunged. Thank God there was a wall between the two windows, because otherwise it's gonna be a disaster. My cat she's just tough. She's tough. No, Padilha. No. No. Anyway, that small interlude of this cat romance gone awry aside, what I was talking about is that this is a book that reads a lot like those anthropomorphic animal movies, like Kung Fu Panda, like that Robin Hood movie.
Thought she was about to compare it to Winds of Change. I was about to die.
Just all of those movies that have animals, like Zootopia, right? But it's more of a fantasy setting, so it reads a lot like that, and I feel like that is the very specific type of ambience and the very specific type of character building that is very appealing to boys around that age. And I feel like, first things first, giving boys books is an amazing thing.
Yes.
And we should give more books to boys.
Yes. I've said it so much. Mini rant here. Growing up, I'm glad I grew up at the time I did, because there was so much focus on like physical play and reading. I try to get back into reading. I've just finished Macbeth by Joe Nesbo, which is just sort of crime thriller adaptation of the play by Shakespeare. But yeah, absolutely. I was so thankful growing up I grew up in a time that was less digital, because the amount I read as a kid and the amount I did physical play, I think that not physical play, but like playing with Legos and imaginative play, I think that genuinely helped me a lot with, not just in writing, I think just a lot of stuff creatively. Creative in depth. This is why I find out she's actually going to give it 1 star, and it helped me. It did help me at all. But it helped me so much in that, and unfortunately now, like, I remember seeing it when I was leaving work, when I was getting on the train. Just so many kids get fucking frisbee tossed an iPad. And part of that is, parents have to work more than ever. Some people in the United States work 3 jobs just to stay afloat. And you haven't got time, unfortunately, so you have to just sort of give something that occupies them. But unfortunately, the main way of which you can pacify your child is just giving them something that occupies them. It doesn't nurture them. It doesn't promote any sort of imaginative play. It doesn't promote creativity, which I think is just so important in creative endeavors in adulthood, but also just like enjoying yourself as a kid. And they don't have that anymore. It's all, and I mean, you could have a whole conversation about how AI generated content is going to make that just, they're going to be on a 24/7 reel taking it all in, but yeah, absolutely. People need to read more. I, as someone who uses the computer a lot for entertainment and for work, ultimately, I hate that kids are so, or people generally are so digital device bound. I wish I saw more people reading, which I know sounds like a very nerd, I'm superior sort of thing to say. Like, I've only just started reading and finished a book over the last month. But yeah, it's a real shame, especially boys as well. I think there's just something about, like, reading isn't for people growing up or something. Like, absolutely not. But anyway, that's a whole different conversation. But yeah, I agree.
If anything, so that they can also be able to explore their sensitive side, and to be able to explore their creativity. And I feel like we don't give boys enough books. And if we do, we usually don't have that many books that are catered to boys around that age. So I feel like it's important that we have more books that are boy-centered in that sense, because we need to raise better boys. And I feel like this is a book that really helps us raise better boys because of the themes that it treats about. So going into the things that I really liked about this book, the first thing is the writing. The writing is very cinematic.
Yes.
And I feel like it feeds into this idea of this book
reading
almost like, again, Kung Fu Panda. Because I can't stop thinking about Kung Fu Panda, especially the fight sequences. It's very Kung Fu Panda for me.
Okay.
The way that it's written, it's very cinematic. And again, I'm a huge fan of purple prose. I absolutely love This Is How You Lose a Time War. And, I love...
Cloud Cuckoo Country did a video on that. And I love Cloud Cuckoo Country. I'm sure the moment you click on it, you'll see why. It's because they got this sort of bird avatar who does it. But I also think, I just love it. I love it. I'm not usually into people who do reading, sort of book videos, but they're one of my favorite to watch. So if you want to watch about How to Lose the Time War, I think it's called. You should go check out that channel. It's really good.
Purple Bros. I'm a Purple Bros bitch. What can I say? But it's written in a way that I can almost see the scenes happening, and I can almost see the scenes taking place as if it's in a movie. So there are very many parts of the book where it's very cinematic to read. Let me read an excerpt for you guys.
Please don't.
Nothing
Fuck. Okay, go on.
steered in the maze of snow-covered trees. Within the confines of the woods, only the snow was daring enough to move. It floated down from the heavens, white specks swinging to and fro in the chilling breeze, adding to the white blanket over the ground. Undisturbed, the vast pillow looked plump to the woodland creatures that wandered between the trees. Following from a hole excavated into a trunk, edging out from its shelter, came a creature. It was tiny, with one curious... Oh!
Eh? Did something just happen? What's wrong? Are you okay? This is where she discovers, actually, I fucking hate this book.
So it died on me.
Huh? Oh, it died. Okay.
Let me see if I can find it again. The creature heard a noise. A rapid padding through the snow, something propelling itself at great speed, but it couldn't pinpoint where it was coming from. Frantically looking around, it sought the source of the noise but failed to see it. The sound grew louder. It turned to retreat to its home, trudging through the snow at a brisk pace. With every step, the noise grew closer, increasing in volume. Yeah! And so it begins the story of Corsair, and Corsair is, in this part, running around with his mount, which is called an Iktar. We're going to talk a little bit more about this in a second, but there is never a clear description of an Iktar in this.
That was... I saw Lou's feedback because she gave me feedback like months before this video came out. And I read it, and she said that, and I looked at it, and I was like, there's no fucking way I missed that. And I went through it. And it's just one of those things that I do where, like, I had a massive problem in GCSE exams with this, where I know the thinking, and I know the arithmetic, and I know the process I'm going through to get to the answer, but the examiner doesn't. Like, the examiner doesn't see into my head, and I'd kind of assumed that was the case, so a lot of the time I'd give my answer, and I wouldn't get a good mark on it, because the teacher was like, how did you get from here to here? And I was just completely missing, it slipped the mind, you know, I'd assumed that they could see what I see, and they couldn't. And that really just happened there. It's not excusable because, like, this is meant to be a fantasy beast, and I haven't given a description of it. And, like, that's what? Huh? Like, you call yourself a fucking writer? What are you doing, Harrison? What the fuck are you up to? But yeah, that really boggled my mind when I saw that. I looked at that and I went and I checked, and I was like, oh my god, I haven't even put in a fucking description. I can't believe that. So yeah, that was really bad. That's. Yeah, again, I think I did a good job with the first book, but stuff like that, I'm not fucking Harlan Coben, am I?
And so this made me really confused.
Yeah, that's fine.
To be fair, but what I wanted to say with this is that this specific scene, I remember reading it, and this specific scene reminded me a lot. You know, in Ice Age, the movies where you have that squirrel who keeps chasing after the nut.
He got it in the end, by the way. What a fucking great story.
And that sort of everything happens right after the scene of the squirrel. It reminded me a lot of that, like how the movies always use this sort of cinematic aspect to introduce
That's really
the characters.
Okay.
Specifically, this reminded me a lot of Ice Age. But
that's funny because I actually that was just mainly the first couple of times I wrote the book, and I wrote it out fully. There was no sort of Ikthars. I dislike doing this because this sort of creates the idea of a supplementary reading. Like, oh, if you want to find out what an Ikthar looked like, you have to go and watch this video, which isn't acceptable. It needs to be in the book because the book should have everything you need to understand it. You shouldn't have to go to a wiki or a video. The intention was like, yeah, they're meant to be just massive quadrupedal, like four-legged wolves, pretty much. Four-legged wolves, just fantasy, like I don't know, like sort of cross a borzoi with like a massive direwolf or something, and then bang, that's an Ikthar, really. That was the mental image in my mind that I had. And is it like the most creative? No, because you have wolf people and then you have like big old dogs. But I thought like that was the most. I thought that'd be like a really sort of affectionate thing, like just hearing about having like these massive sort of direwolf wolf dogs, sort of cross fantasy creatures, whatever. I wanted them to be like lethal, like fearsome. But I also wanted it to be like when they had their cute moments, you can go, oh my god, that's so adorable. Oh my god, what a cute little guy. Yeah, that was really the intention with that. And what I was gonna say is a lot of it, like before then, before like 2018, I started writing it in like 2017, and I wrote it over like a bunch of times. There were no Ikvas. It was just Corsair and a lot of hind paw combat, or boots on the ground combat, as we say as normal humans, and not the weird pseudo furry that I am. Yeah, it was a lot of just like running around, but what I found out was, I watched How to Train Your Dragon, and I saw the relationship Hiccup had with Toothless, and I was like, I want that to be in the book, because I think that is just such a good way of having these sweet, tender, like moments of friendship and companionship amidst quite severe topics. Like, it is intentional that the story isn't necessarily. I don't think it's like grim, dark, heavy, but it's there are moments where it can be bad. It can be heavy. Stuff like death, dealing with death in the family, and a lot of bloodshed, and dealing with that, and dealing with the baggage that comes with that, as well as seeing your own world that you've lived in for the last 20 years just fully unravel, and you're being seated with all these different responsibilities and things that you have to overcome in order to even get a chance of having that back. Like, that is the sort of story I wanted to tell. So it ending up as a sort of like teen, tween, fantasy middle grade, which I don't even know what that means. That's purely unintentional. I was just like, I want to write a book like this, and I wrote the book. That was it. Like, I just wanted to write a good story first and foremost. The genre and the audience didn't really come to mind. But yeah, How to Train Your Dragon literally revolutionized it on that front. Harengoth and Quickpaw weren't even an idea to me before I watched that, and I was like, right, I want some fantasy beasts in there. And honestly, I think it completely refurbished the series. There's a lot more. There's more opportunities for comedic relief. There's more opportunities for like nice, sweet moments. Because there's also like the sort of comedic thing where like sometimes they'll talk to them, and like Corsair will say something to Quickpaw, and Quickpaw like almost reacts as if he fully understands it. And I've had some people go like, so what is the metric there? Like, are Ikvars sentient? Do they understand like their speech? And I don't really give a firm answer to that, because I like it to be just like a sort of comedic moment. So the moment I try and give like some sort of in-universe rational explanation for that, people just start poking holes in it. So I'd rather it just be like, oh, okay, like that's just meant to be a funny moment, and people just take it face value for what it is, rather than something that you're meant to interrogate and an aspect of a world building kind of thing. Yeah, it's completely refurbished it, including these sort of beasts in there. And I'm really glad I did in the end. But yeah, ultimately, the point being, one, How to Train Your Dragon was the inspiration. Two, the fact I didn't put a description for them in there is really fucking shit. I don't know how I did that.
I'm just pulling out all of the movies that I watched when I was a kid that had anthropomorphic animals.
Over the Hedge is coming up
because,
next.
yeah. So I think that the writing in this is very easy to understand and very easy to make this world to be comprehended as well. Again, this is something that I feel is better suited for younger audiences. And so at certain points, it might feel that the writing is a bit youngish and a bit less mature. But I think that this is why it hits so well with this younger audience, and why I think that this would be such an interesting gift for you to get. I'm just here. Do you have a nephew? Or,
no.
A godson that is around the ages of 13 and 14, and you're like, I'm not gonna give this guy, this boy, a Nerf gun. I can't afford that.
Nah, give him... Okay, you can't afford it, fair enough. You can't afford it, fair enough. But if it's like moral... like a moral objection, like I don't want to give him a Nerf gun. I had a Nerf gun as a kid. I fucking enjoyed them. I loved them so much. But also give him a book. Give him a book as well, Give him a book and give him a Nerf gun.
Cansou de partir corações? So if you're like out of ideas for gifts, to give to the 13-year-old boy in your life, may I suggest you giving them The Sharpened Fence of Lupine Spirit. I feel like the writing...
Listen, that's a recommendation. I know the recommendation was if there's nothing else, go for this, but that's a fucking recommendation, and I'm taking it. I'm taking it. I'm putting it on a CV
very
and framing
catered
it.
to that age range, and not only that, but also because of the themes that the book discusses. And the main one that I think was
Masculinity.
very interesting was the depiction of masculinity in this. We're very used to seeing books and media in general that is catered to boys be made in ways that depict toxic masculinity a lot. So it's a lot of violence, it's a lot of not talking about your feelings, not discussing your feelings, not discussing the impact that your actions have on other people. Think of superhero stories that don't really depict those difficult conversations. And I feel like this is a book that really goes in depth about this. Like, the main character, Corsair, he all the time, he's constantly talking about his feelings. And he's having his feelings validated by other people. And it's very clear in the book that when his feelings are not validated, that is wrong, because what he's feeling deserves respect. And I feel like this is very interesting to see how a book can depict masculinity and the ideas of masculinity, like honor, like sacrifice, like protecting the weak, all the things that we interpret as being tangled with toxic masculinity as well, how all of it is put in such an interesting light and questioned all the time. Like, he questions all the time, like, why do I have to be strong? Why do I have to put myself in the position where I need to prove myself to other people that I'm strong? I'm not. I'm just trying to do my own thing. And I'm not ready for all this responsibility. And I feel like this is such an interesting conversation and an interesting depiction to have, especially in this transition where you're transitioning from a child to an adult, and that specific part of your life where you're no longer a child, but you're not really a teenager. And so you're still like, I don't want all of this responsibility. I don't want this responsibility to be a man. I don't want to man up. That is not what I want to do. And I feel like this book depicts that moment so well. And I feel like this could be a very interesting place for young boys to have someone read things that are like, no, I get where you're going through. I get this feeling that you have. And it sucks, but we have to brave through it. And I feel like the very honest discussions of the grief, of the pain, of, you know, being subjected to abusive relationships, having abusive people in your life and how that impacts you, and how having certain people acting certain ways towards you is wrong, and that you can't accept certain types of behavior, and that sometimes it's okay if you're not strong enough. And I feel like this book really discusses those topics really well. And it's a very honest depiction of masculinity, and also a very honest depiction of toxic masculinity, of how bad it is when the feelings of this toxicity that comes with masculinity, how when they take root, how destructive they can be. So I think that this was brilliant, and this is a very young...
She fucking said brilliant. Put that on the plaque as well. Yes.
Author. I'm not just saying this.
Rewind, sorry.
And this is a very young author. I'm not just saying this, but like, it's very impressive to me to have an author this young be able to be so aware of how masculinity impacts other people. And so this was a brilliant discussion of masculinity in this book. As a feminist, I really, really liked it. It reminded me
I'm in with the
of
feminists.
The Will to Change by Bell Hooks.
I'm in with Bell
Hooks. I mentioned this when I sent my email with the
feminists love the Sharpened Fangs and Lupine Spirit. They
the
love
author.
the Wolfmen.
And my, the review that I sent him, I actually said, I think you should read Bell Hooks, because
I do need to read
like
that
this
book.
would actually help you develop this character further on in the series. So yeah, I love this discussion of masculinity in this book. It was so interesting.
I'm in.
And this ties together with another aspect that I thought was incredible, which was the very honest and raw depiction of war. The depiction of
Yes.
war in this is very in your face. It's not a moment of glory and honor. It's depicted as something that is bad and something that ruins people's lives, and that taking someone's life is a weight that you have to carry forever. And I feel like not glorifying war, especially in contexts where the idea of war and going to war and fighting for your country and etc., is so tangled with the idea of masculinity, again, in this toxic masculinity that I was talking about. I
I
think that
agree
it
with
was
that.
so interesting just how this depiction of war, being so honest, was put so candidly on the page. Like, we follow this main character being like very much conflicted about his role in this war, and how eventually he's like, I don't want to be a part of this. I don't want to be a part of this. Like, I don't want to be a part of this, and realizing that he's stuck, that there is no way out of this. And so it feels very raw and very honest, and I'm glad that we can have books that depict war in not positive lights, because it feels like it doesn't make light of something that is very serious and something that is very like, we shouldn't be teaching our young boys to crave going to war as a way to prove themselves, and I feel like this book does this very well. So because of the
Okay, I'm gonna speak now because she's finished her thought. She seemed like she was on a roll there, so I didn't want to interrupt her. So the two main things she's brought up there, and the war one, Rachel, I can't remember what she said about the battle scenes. But specifically the masculinity one, Rachel brought up as well. It seems like the higher rating. I'm pretty sure Rachel like gave it a 3, but the way she was talking, like a lot of me and a bunch of people who watched the video, they turned to me and said, "Yeah, Harrison, this is a spiritual 4. Like, this is 4 out of 5 stars." So like, yeah, it's a 3. Which I'm still thankful for, by the way. That's not me being ungrateful. I'm thankful for. I've been told that like a 3 is like a good book. You should read this book, kind of thing. But I'm pretty sure at the end of the video anyway, Rachel was like, "Yeah, just give it 4s. I gave it 4 stars. What the hell?" That kind of thing. But the masculinity with I'm really appreciative of how Lou spoke about it, and the not the conversation, but the way she spoke through how it made her feel, and how it was a brilliant. She said brilliant, and I'm hanging on that. Brilliant discussion of that. I do have to admit, I just fucking wrote, man. I just the one the one moment where I sort of opposed toxic masculinity, I put opposed in question marks, because it really was just like, there was a like Axel, who's one of his friends that he meets in Crossguard training. He has a plaited tail, and he makes like an offhand comment that's like, or an off-poor comment, as they'd say, that's like, yeah, it's not very masculine, or yeah, it's so masculine, Corsair, like very sarcastically. And Corsair turns around and he's just like, it doesn't matter if it's masculine or not. Like, if that's what you like wearing, then that's just up to you. It doesn't matter. And then Axel was just like, oh, thank you, kind of thing. So that was like the one moment. I said this in Rachel's video as well. That was the one deliberate moment where it was sort of like, men of men, it doesn't change anything if you wear a dress. But, sorry, I lost my train of thought for a moment. But yeah, that was like the one deliberate moment. But the rest of it was just like, that is genuinely just perspective, worldview. That I think that just naturally came through in how I wrote as part of me. I really, like, just thanks to my parents, I guess. I had very supportive parents who were very considerate of my feelings and everything. And I like fully identify as a man. I try and be masculine and all, like, stereotypically masculine and everything. So like, the upbringing I had wasn't at all like some sort of, it wasn't dependent on me identifying as a different gender. It was absolutely just, I'm a man. I like showing myself as a man. I like being a man, but the ideas of sensitivity and considering feelings and respecting people as human beings, regardless of their varying resilience emotionally and mentally and physically, like, that was just something I learned through the kindness of my parents. So I'm very thankful, because then that's clearly just come through on a subconscious level of the writing. Then there was the other one about war, and that one's actually kind of interesting because there is one thing that got brought up a bit as sort of like the dubious point of the book, if we're not talking about the birthing scene. It's the battle. I had some people who said, really, it wasn't ever seen as the remarkable moment of the book. It was sort of just, it was a scene that happened, and it was a scene where Corsair became so scarred by war. But really, if it ever did get brought up, unfortunately, it was more so that people didn't really like it. They didn't like the flow of it. I never really got solid sort of pinpoints as to why people disliked it, but I did get generally the feeling of I disliked this. I just generally disliked it. I didn't like how it was written, and that's fair enough. People didn't like the battle scene. I thought I did a good job on it, but then, I wrote this, when I was 18, like 16 to 18, it's got rewritten a bunch, and I'm 3 years older now, so yeah, it's fair enough. It just didn't bang as I thought it was going to. So the fact that Lou actually found this to be quite, I think maybe it's something you can still find even if maybe the scene isn't phenomenal. You can still look at it and you can go, like, the whole experience is there, and the sort of moment of panic is there as well that comes with the territory of just killing someone. And coming from the territory of I disarm people, I non-lethally fight people, and now I'm killing them. And it's good that resonated so much with Lou. I remember when I was writing it, and I don't think even in the first draft there was ever a scene where Corsair came out as a hero. There was never a scene where he emerged from that, and it was meant to be a triumphant moment or a moment where he was like the war hero, because to me it just didn't even make sense. Like, this guy who's never fought in a war before and really only has the technical skill of fighting people based on a career he had where he wasn't meant to kill them, like, would absolutely be shitting himself the whole time. Like, I don't remember if Axel was prominent during that scene. Quickpaw certainly wasn't there, but I do remember that every time I wrote that scene, it would always end with the sort of realization as to the destruction that just came about. So yeah, I do find it interesting. There's a lot of different voices in regards to the battle scenes, which I do think I have improved on for the second book and the third book. I do think I've definitely improved on, because again, the first book I wrote when I was 16 to 18, rewrite for the second book happened when I was about 20. So my writing skill with my age has gone up, so I think that's a bit better. But also the third book, I like to think the battle scene's going to be better. But anyway, that's interesting. I found it really, really interesting. But again, I do have to clarify that it was literally just the whole point of me writing Vostremar was I want to write a good story, and some parts are deliberate, for instance, again, the Axel scene and the whole thing about gender and masculinity, but I think a lot of it is also just sort of subconscious. But I'm really happy there's the subjective interpretation. Again, I find it hilarious, but I also find it really genuinely intriguing that people visualize it completely differently to me. Like, these guys visualize it as Disney movies. So Rachel visualized it as the Robin Hood, and it seems like Lou visualizes it as like Kung Fu Panda Ice Age sort of style, which is completely at odds with me. Because I view it in a lot more of a grittier style. I think these guys maybe view it as more of a sort of anthro style. Like, imagine sort of like the typical melding of a human and an animal, but it's got more sort of features of the animal sort of thing. I don't know, it's difficult to describe, but I think the way they've envisioned it is different to mine, and I think one of the things I do need to consider, because I really do like writing with the sort of animal people thing. It's not something I'm just going to do with Vostremar. I really enjoy it for the terms of the expressiveness and the world building, and ultimately I think it's just nice. I think it's just not even a niche. It's just like, imagine reading like a really good story, but they're all and I'm saying that as a prospect, by the way. I'm not saying that to be up my own ass. Like, oh yeah, this is a really good story, you should read it. But imagine going through a really good story, but they're all animal people instead of just like humans. And I think that just adds to like the novel value of it. And it just makes it more intriguing, at least to me. To some people, they don't like that. They find it too kiddie and whatever. And I think maybe it's some people, I don't necessarily agree with people disengaging with it like inherently because they think that is a childish thing. But like, absolutely, like, if people aren't into it, that's fine. But I think it's sort of really interesting thing. Which is why I completely understand, but it also fucking pained me where Lou was like, it read like furry shit at the beginning. That was like a bullet in the chest, because I I agree, not because I think it is just for typical furry shit, but because I get it. Because I fucking get it. I'll give you the short version, but I watched a friend play through a furry visual novel called Winds of Change, and it's meant to be this really... It's what is it, marketed and publicized as this sort of like, it's amazing, it's like, it's wow, like branching adventure, and it's so great, it's so cool, and it's just not. Like, with all the respect from one creative to another, it's shit, it's awful, but it's got like overwhelmingly positive ratings on Steam, because unfortunately the media literacy of a lot of furries really just goes down to, can I fuck them? Are they hot? Yes. All right, I'm giving it a positive review. I mean that. I genuinely mean that. So it pained me to hear it. Not, and this isn't me being like, oh fuck you, Lou, how dare you say that? But more so just like, I heard it and I felt pain, because I completely understanded that concern, because there's just so much anthro furry stuff out there that really is just treated as another degree of smut, and I kind of hate it, because I like the aesthetic, and I think it can genuinely be used as sincere, believable, and engaging storytelling. I don't think it's just something that really is just to serve the purpose of like jerking off or something like that. I genuinely mean it. And that's not to say, like, you know, like, all of that stuff that is written for that purpose, like, that's morally wrong or something. Like, if people want to do that, they do what they want with their time. But I just dislike that it's become almost like a one-dimensional thing where that's all furry media is meant to be. And I have anthromedia, furry media, whatever title you want to use. So to me, it was just like, I like the aesthetic, I think it's interesting, and I think for a fantasy genre, if anything, it gives more opportunity for the world building. So I was like, yeah, absolutely, I wanna use animals in that. And there you go. It began like that. And yeah, really the aim was just, I want to write a good story and I want to have fun while doing it. And that was it. So, but I'm glad Lou and Rachel have had so many positive interpretations of it. I think we are going to get to the negative part though, so I'm going to have to put on a bulletproof vest because I'm going to get shot in the fucking chest again.
The way that it's written, and the characters, they're animals, and so they're like wolves and rabbits and you know, dogs and again, like Kung Fu Panda. And it's it's really funny. I thought it was really funny in several moments where certain things were changed to fit the fact that these were animals.
Yeah.
And so there were certain parts of the book where he's like, oh, I'm gonna put my hind paw down. And I was like, your hind paw? Oh, your foot. You're gonna put your foot down. Okay, all right. Or they were like, oh, they were paw in paw. And I was like, oh, hand in hand.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So...
That's funny. I like that. Yeah, when you write a thing anthromedia, sorry, I'm sitting here like I've written this for 50 years, but when you write it, I think you always have to appreciate that maybe to some people it's going to be a bit funny, a bit weird. And I don't think she means like, oh, it's funny in a bad way, just like there's just something funny about these typical phrases like hand in hand for paw in paw. I'm going to put my foot down, I'm going to put my hind paw down. I think even in the third book, I wrote a phrase that also did something similar like that. So yeah, kind of have to embrace that. I don't think you should completely obviously shirk the tone, but you have to understand that some people are just going to find that charming and amusing, and that's completely fine. I enjoy that she enjoyed that aspect of it. I think Rachel said something similar as well, so.
I thought that was so funny. This is not useful commentary for anyone, but every time that I caught something like that, it was so funny to me. Anyway, now this book actually ended up having a 3.5 star from me because I feel like there were things that needed to be improved.
Here we go.
Don't
bring up the birth scene.
Before was the idea of an Ichthar. The Ichthar is the mount, and almost like the horse of the main characters, and they are a huge part of the story. But at no point,
description.
The description of an Ichthar is giving to me. So I'm like, what does this look like?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't have anything to go with. Like, what? Please.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that I feel like could be improved a lot was the pacing. The book was very slow at the beginning, and again, like exposition, I'm a bit of a bitch when it comes to pacing. But the book begins very slow at the beginning, and it suddenly goes from 0 to 100 very quickly. And so a lot of things happen in the last half. And so the book becomes very fast paced from the middle of the book onwards. And I feel like this is not good, because the beginning becomes really slow, and at certain parts it dragged on a bit. I think that there were some scenes, and I think that this is because this is a book written by an author who is very young. The author is just 19, or was just 19 when he published this book. I think that the idea is that certain scenes exist only for exposition. And again, I am a little bit of I'm very particular about the exposition of in my books, and so I like the way that the book was written, but at the same time I feel like the pacing should have worked a little bit better. And so
that is a particularly striking piece of critique as well, because sorry, I'm gonna sound like a 12-year-old kid. Like my mum read the book, because my mum sort of nurtured the. I have to thank my parents for even getting to this point. Genuinely, as cliche and as honestly cheese as it is for a fucking video reaction, but it's you know, a lot of kids would have started writing stuff, and then they would have taken it to their parents, and their parents wouldn't have given a shit, and then the child would have, you know, felt sort of rejected, and they wouldn't have pursued it. But my parents always nurtured my pursuit of writing. And ultimately, it got to the point it did because my parents were so supportive, both financially at points, and also just always emotionally and morally. They were always supportive of my work. So my mum, you know, like, she's my biggest fan and my strongest critic. She read The Sharpened Fangs when it came out, and she turned to me and she said 5 stars. Like, she loved it. But the one critique she had was the pacing, and I completely agree with it. Honestly, it was... I think if I hadn't written a series yet and I was to completely rewrite it now, I would have done it a lot differently. But I think what happened, and I said this in Rachel's video, there were aspects of it that I sort of got locked into having that way, because I rewrote it so many times. You know how, like, you know, you're handing in something to someone and you've just finished it, and you hand it in and you don't, you know, they'll be like, oh, go edit it, and you'll go edit it. And you don't really recognize the mistakes there, because you've been so used to going over it and over it and over it that you've sort of become blind to it. You've habituated to it. And at that point, I had rewritten the book so many times that at that point, I think it just really didn't occur to me, the pacing. But absolutely right. If I had a second shot of starting the series off, I absolutely would have rewritten it. Probably completely again. But I do think in spite of that, I certainly think out of a series, the beginning will be the weakest, which is a bit of a drawback, because ideally you want the first book to be one of the strongest, because you want to engage people. And some people may read it and go, yeah, I'm not really into it, and sort of sign off of it, which isn't good for a series of 7 books where you really have to sort of keep the pace up, but or keep the intrigue up, rather. But I also think the silver lining is that really, unless I somehow royally fuck up, it really won't get any worse than that. So I think from here, the book's qualities will increase, and I think the overall engagement and enjoyment people will have of a book will increase as well, and people will really come to love it. So yeah, but I think I just became blind to the pacing issue in the same way I became fucking blind to the fact there's no description of an Ickthar. Like, that's just so bad. That's actually so shit.
So one of the things that I absolutely love in fantasy is political intrigue.
Yeah, and there wasn't a lot in this book.
This book really has political intrigue in troves, and it really talks about it as well. But I feel like if the pacing of the book was worked better, the political intrigue would be better. Inklings of this political meltdown that happens later on in the book from the beginning and from the get-go, because the way that it's written, it's almost out of nowhere, and I feel like a lot of the action of the book, a lot of the things that happen in the book are not properly set before, so it just happens out of nowhere and you're like, holy shit, where did this come from? And I feel like that sort of mirrors the confusion that Corsair himself feels like, where did this all come from?
But it doesn't make a good reader experience.
I feel like as the reader, we should have had inklings of the mess that are...
Like, you don't understand how much is pissing me off as a perfectionist. Like, she's saying this now, and I'm sitting here, and in my head, I'm like, why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? And there's no point, because, like, I'm not going to go and retcon the fucking first book. Like, the first book is as it is. I'm going to leave it as it is. Like, I'm not going to go and, like, ask my publishers, hey, can you put in this description of an Ickthar there? Absolutely fucking not. That was my mistake. It's going to stay that way. and I'm going to have to improve from it in the coming books. Like, I'm just gonna have to fix that. But yeah, it's really pissing me off because I'm sitting here and I'm like, she has so many fucking good points. Why didn't I do that? Why didn't I do this? What the fuck were you thinking? Like, even for those who do know the first book, towards the end, you know, like where Corsair almost dies, I'm sitting there and I'm like, why didn't I change that? Why didn't I fucking change that? Like, why didn't I do this or this or this? And people are sitting there and going like, oh, what's the significance of that specific scene that you'd want to change it? I can't say, but my fucking god, man. You don't understand how much this is making me just go like, why didn't you write this when you were fucking older, when you knew more? That's also a difficult thing I have, because sometimes I have so many good ideas up my own ass again, but you get what I mean, ideas that I'm really passionate about, and then I'm sitting down and I'm like, do I shelf this until I have more knowledge and until I know more about the craft? But I don't think that's a good idea. I think because you're always going to get better ideas and good ideas coming along, I think use the idea now, and that's going to become such a formative experience. If you're writing with shit ideas because, oh, I'm not good enough to write with good ideas, yeah, you're going to come to hate the craft. Like, write stuff you enjoy writing, and you're always going to get a new idea coming along. Like, I love the Vostremar series, I really do, and I think even the first book, in spite of the hiccups it has here and there that really I became blind to over time, it's always going to mean so much to me, and it genuinely does. And also it's the sort of start of using this aesthetic with animal people and what I write, but also the amount of ideas I had even after the first book came out, where I was like, I want to do this, I want to do this after the series is done. It's insane, you know? Like, I really doubt that anyone is going to write something and then they're never going to have a good idea that they enjoy ever again. I really doubt that.
Is going to happen later on in the book. We should have been privy to that before.
Yes.
But that's my personal opinion. Maybe some people like to be surprised. And I talked a lot about the idea of masculinity and war, and this ties a lot with the development of Corsair from a
you find him a whiny bitch. That's fair.
From the beginning to a character who has to grow and step into positions and into a responsibility that he never wanted in the first place, but he's forced to get it. I get that the character sometimes will resist this change, but sometimes it came across as a lot of whining, and it came to a point where I was just like, yeah, I know it fucking sucks, but like at some point you gotta get on with the program. Yeah,
that's fair enough. One of the things I think about media, what a fucking grand statement. what I'm trying to say is, one of the things I think in regards to like writing stories and stuff and writing that kind of thing, I don't think there's any greater sin in making people, or like a reader or a viewer, dislike a character than making them annoying. I genuinely, if you want to fast track away to having a character like completely disliked by people, make them annoying. Like, you have, you know, like You, the Netflix series You, Joe Goldberg does some reprehensible shit across the 4 seasons that are out in that show. Reprehensible shit. People want to fuck him, people love him, there's like girl bossification videos of him. People love that character. I love that character, right? And so, in spite of some of the evil shit he does, people like him as that. People really like him as a villain. But people can very quickly come to dislike a character they find them annoying, and not in the sense of, oh, I dislike this character because he's so evil, but like, I dislike this character because they're written in a way that makes it not fun to have them around. And with Corsair, I don't know if God, I hate saying this phrase. I don't know if I like fully agree with the whole like, oh, like I just found. Well, okay, I can't say I don't agree with that, because it was her experience with it. Like, of course, she did obviously not like that he was whinging so much, and that was partially intentional. Maybe I laid it on a bit too thick with how much he whinges, but it could be difficult. It could be really difficult writing the sort of stuff, because if you've read the book, you know the sort of heavy stuff he goes through, and no doubt the heavy stuff him and his cohort will go through as he's throughout the series. But it's always a struggle when you're writing some severe stuff that it doesn't drag on for too long. Like, if someone close to the main character dies, you want to have the necessary and reverent respect for that moment for both the reader who might have been close to that character, and also to contextualize it in a way that makes sense in the actual story. But if that's just constantly coming up in every single other interaction, yeah, in real life, it probably would overhang you for like the rest of your life. But I'm reading a book and I want to have fucking fun. Can we have some better interactions where that's not the only tone going on here, you know? Like, I completely get that, so you have to be really careful with it. But yeah, I see what she's saying. I don't know to the extent I'd agree with it, which again, I hate as a phrase because I'm the fucking author, like... Okay, but and also your criticism doesn't become valid for as long as I agree with it. Her criticism is her criticism, and I'm thankful for it. But yeah,
because it's not you know there is a limit to how much whining you can get in a single book, and I felt like sometimes a lot of his resistance to the change came across as very too childish, I feel. And so this is one of the things that really put me off a little bit. So here's a little bit of a spoiler. If you don't want that, you feel free to jump to the part that I'm going to put here. But at a certain point, we find out that the main character's dad, who's called Arthur, he is abusive towards his son. And again, tying together with the idea of the plot and the things that were not necessarily worked out so well with the pacing, the fact that his father is abusive should have been spread out from the beginning, but this is not the idea that we have. And so the fact that his dad is abusive and was abusive, it came sort of out of nowhere, and I was left wondering, like, why is this character like this? Like, it makes no sense. And I never had any sort of inkling beforehand that this character would be abusive.
yeah, I can see that maybe it's difficult because I think a lot of the interactions that Corsair has with his dad before that moment, I feel like it's hinted quite a bit, not hinted necessarily as to what happened, but I think it's hinted quite a bit that his father is quite harsh on him. I mean, you're in the first scene, and the critique here, because I read it in the written review she gave me, is that there's such a U-turn in how he is, and specifically at the beginning in the prologue, which, yes, is the accursed part of the fucking series, but, like, he's very loving to his two pups, his two sons, right? And then they become adults, we go 20 years in the future, and then all of a sudden he's a piece of shit to them. And, like, where was the jump in that? And I can't explain the reasons for it because it is pertinent, but I will say that it is a deliberate choice that at the beginning he's very nice with them and he's a loving father with them, and, you know, and then you turn around and you get to the main part and all of a sudden he's really mean to Corsair, specifically Corsair. That is deliberate, and I think maybe the prologue is too brief. I think maybe that's the sin there. The prologue is too brief to pick up on it, that he's nice at first. Or maybe, I don't know, that's one of the things maybe I could have changed, but ultimately, it is intentional, and I do think it is made apparent that even if the specific instance that went on, that is highlighted as the main abusive incident that led to the onset of everything, like, if that isn't made apparent throughout, there are also other behaviours with how Arthur treats him that generally is, you know, I think signifies quite well abuse, but also just generally like a quite mean and verging on cruel way of treating his son. You also have throughout the inkling in regards to the bite on the neck, he's always covering the left side of his neck, which maybe I don't know if that maybe that went overhead, not overhead, sorry, that implies I'm always trying to phrase myself in a way that can't be misconstrued as like being ungrateful author. I don't want to turn around and be like, yeah, well, maybe you're too stupid to pick on the inkling. But it's like throughout a lot of the time, Corsair is covering his neck. In fact, there's a conversation with Bohesia where like she's like, you're doing that a lot, and he goes, yeah, there's no reason, like, sort of thing. And then it's revealed that that's where he was bitten. He has the scar there, and they have that conversation. So, and he's always doing that around his father or whenever he's stressed. And I think that was an inkling that maybe just didn't get noticed there. But I do appreciate, again, the feedback.
And so it felt a little weird to me that this wasn't something that was properly set up beforehand. And I thought it was a little confusing. Although I really like the discussion that this specific character being abusive would bring, I feel like it should have been properly set up better.
Okay.
So that was a downside for me. And again, like I said before, no one gave me an explanation of what an Ichthar was. I would really like to have one
Yeah,
because
yeah, I
I
know.
need something to go to imagine what
Yeah.
this animal looks like. And it's almost like, you know how in Goofy, Goofy has a dog, although Goofy is a dog.
Oh, for
And
fuck's
so I'm
sake.
like, is this like a Goofy dog situation?
No.
Like, where
Well,
Goofy
I mean, maybe, but not in the way. No. It's not like, oh, I'm a wolf and that's a wolf. Like, oh, I'm a dog person, here's my dog kind of thing. It's not like Night in the Woods where, like, they're all animal people and then, like, May's a cat and then you just see, like, a four-legged cat walking around. And I'm pretty sure that gets brought up at one point. But, no, it's not like that. But then again, I can't really blame her for thinking that because I didn't give a fucking description. Again, the Ickthard's meant to be, like, a massive direwolf and a sort of crossed with a borzoi kind of thing. But they go by a different name and ultimately, like, yeah, I'm sitting here and I'm just like, how can I really say that, like, they're different, but they were sort of designed in a way to be, like, really cute based on sort of, like, how we are infatuated with dogs, like big dogs and wolves and stuff. But, yeah, it's not the most creative creature, and I'm sure there would have been a way to, like, make, like, sort of bugs cute, like, sort of bug riders or whatever, but it's what stuck to me the most as an idea. And, yeah, no, but again, as much as I enjoyed that, I really should have given a description. Ugh, fuck.
you have a dog, and like, what's the difference between this dog and another dog? Like, what's the difference between the wolf that speaks and the wolf that doesn't speak? I would need a little bit more information.
That is okay.
On
That
how
is
it
alright.
goes. Anyway, The Sharpened Fangs of Lupine Spirit got 3.5 stars from me. I rounded down for Goodreads. But I think that the author, it was very impressive how the author is so young yet managed to tackle such interesting themes in the story, and to be so critical of things that exist in our own society. How he was able to be critical of masculinity, how he was able to be critical of the idea of war and the glorification of war. I thought that it was very interesting to see how an author this young was able to do it. And yeah, I had a blast reading it, actually, even though it's not usually what I would look for. I actually had a lot of fun reading it.
That's what I fucking
It
want.
was one of the books where I started reading before bed, and then I blinked and it was 2 a.m. and I read the whole thing in a sitting, and I was like, holy shit. And then I it, and it was one of the books where I started reading before bed, and then I blinked and it was 2 a.m. and I read the whole thing in a sitting.
That is a fucking endorsement. Read my fucking book. That is an endorsement if I've heard one.
And I was like, holy shit. It had been a while since something of that happened, but
yes.
I think that if you like middle grade book, this is going to be a great
I still don't know what that means, but
and
yes.
if you're looking for something to gift for the 13-year-old boy in your life, look no further. This is going to be an amazing addition, an amazing gift to give. Anyways, this was today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you're interested in commissioning me to review your book or review other books that you want me,
if you want honest critique, go to Lou. It's also a really fair price. Of course, like, she understands the time it takes in making a video, writing a script, writing a review, and then taking the time to ultimately read the book, which is the main sort of bulk of it. But it's an absolutely fair price. Like, I've seen people who charge like £200, and I think it really came out around to £40-50, which I think is completely fair for her time. Again, if she had asked like, oh, £100, I would have found the money for it, out of respect for just all the time it takes. But it's fair price. So if you're someone who like has written a book and it hasn't, you know, it's not like a fucking Stephen King thing, and you would like to commission a review for publicity purposes or just like for genuine feedback, you can do it. I'd recommend Lou, and I would absolutely recommend Rachel as well. I imagine Rachel does, I don't know about Lou, they do profile check, so if you have an iffy internet history, I don't think they will commission you, but, you know, they accepted me, and I'm a fucking man-child, so it's great. Throughout the video, I've spoken a lot, so I don't really have much to say at the end. There is one sort of ambiguity, like, place I'm not sure on. There is... Lou and Rachel really enjoyed the book based on the discussion of themes, the masculinity, the war. They really enjoyed that stuff, and I'm glad they did. I'm actually really taken aback with how much it resonated for the masculinity thing, because again, I just wanted to write a fucking story. But if there is one thing I would have liked to know about a little bit more, genuinely the writing. I know she did describe, like, she enjoyed the cinematic style, and everything, but I just want to be sure that like it's not completely be sure. Sorry, I'm sounding like a fucking dickhead here. I do that a lot. I think I'm just realizing that the point I was going to make is moot, because I was going to say like I would have liked to know the exact contribution to the sort of positive score that the actual writing was, because I do like the themes it contributes, the ideas it contributes, and ultimately the story that it tells are integral, equally as integral as the very medium, you know, in the same way that like a piece of art, the image it portrays and the meaning it has is just as important as the way it was done, like the actual tools of the trade. But yeah, it would have been nice to know just how much it contributed to the actual writing style, because I know she said she really enjoyed the cinematic writing style in spite of her leaning towards more sort of fanciful writing, such as the purple prose, which actually was quite a bit of an eye-opener to me, because I always saw purple prose as like a bad thing, like just it's really superfluous, it's too much, it's over-exuberant. And not necessarily as in just like a subjective choice. I always sort of regarded the term and got taught the term was meant to be a bad thing as too much purple prose, but evidently not, so I've learned something new today. But yeah, it would have been nice to also know the exact contribution of the writing style itself, because that also is, to me, is quite important. That's something that I'm trying to read a lot more, so I understand how to improve that writing style and how to generally improve that. But yeah, other than that, I don't really have anything else to say. I guess I can really just round it out with, again, I'm still reeling from the fucking furry thing. Because like if you know me, she's not really wrong. I've been over the sort of pedantics of how I really gel with the term. If you read my book, like, absolutely, I'm pretty sure someone told me a story, someone who like really loved my book, who was trying to sell it to her friends at like a college or school club, and she was saying like, oh yeah, it's anthro people, like it's animal people, and they turned and just said, so it's a furry book. And that really is the struggle there, because we have so many conceptions, and honestly some of them are quite fair, negative conceptions with that word, where like I kind of feel fucking bad when people recommend it, because imagine trying to recommend that book and people just turn around and say, so it's a furry thing, and now they're immediately assuming like you read fucking the literary equivalent of all the single furries. Like that really isn't the isn't the intention. Again, I write with this aesthetic because I really enjoy the expressiveness it yields. I personally just enjoy it a lot. I think it adds a lot to the novel nature of it. Like, yeah, it's a fantasy world, so it's kind of expected to be different to ours. But, like, I think it can work in any genre, provided you go about it the right way. And it has before. Like, there are other writers who aren't well known beyond the purview of the quote-unquote fandom, which I'm not really involved in. That's just sort of the bubble that forms, where a lot of people read it. But that's what I'm trying to do with writing this stuff. That's also a reason why I don't market it as furry, because using that word, you have the negative preconceptions where people will immediately disengage, which again, I don't really blame them for, but also like it also then ends up in sort of like an echo chamber or like a bubble, where really it just ends up catering specifically only to people who are very overtly furry and into that, and I don't really want that. I want it to be a story that people read because they want to read a good story, and the fact that it uses animal people is just like a sort of quirk of the world building, or it's just like a design choice. It's not meant to be some sort of way of advertising. It's really just for creative expression that I'm going for there. So yeah, so no, again, I don't blame like Rachel and Lou, who I don't think really are around that sort of aesthetic much to sort of have the sort of, oh, this is furry shit, because like ultimately, yeah, it is, they're animal people, but I don't really play into the sort of, typically a lot of, and I say this, I know I sound like a dickhead, but typically a lot of furry literature is quite shallow. Again, a lot of it is sold on the merit of purely, I want to fuck this guy, or I want to jerk off to this. That is the merit, and that's why really a lot of that stuff is quite surface level. There is some stuff that breaks that mold, but I haven't really read a lot of that, because I haven't read a lot of anthro stuff myself, because unfortunately a lot of it does end up in the same sort of lane of, I just want to have sex, I just want to imagine sex, like that's it. So yeah, but again, ultimately Vosh Draymar and the stuff I write from this point on is written with the purpose of telling a good story first and foremost, and I hope it does that job. So yeah, I want to thank Lou again for the tremendous review. I really enjoyed going through that. I enjoyed the in-depth look at it. I'm glad she enjoyed it so much. It does mean a lot that she found it to be a brilliant discussion. She found it to be really impressive for the age that I wrote this for. And she also was up and binging it one night, and as she said, like, in a long time she hadn't read a book that, not as fun, sorry, but more so like she hadn't had in a long time an experience of like binging a book because she genuinely enjoyed it. So I'm really glad. I don't know if she'll continue reading this series. If she says it's not typically what she reaches for, so she might not continue with it. If she does, I really do hope she enjoys it. I did consider asking her, do you want to then do a review of the second one, and of course I'll pay you, but I don't really want to, what is it? Part of me doesn't want to haggle her. I know I'm paying her, but also, like, I'm sure she wants to read other books, not just all of mine, and, like, one after the other. Also, because, like, it makes sense to have them review the beginning of the story, because, you know, the first book, because then people who do want to read it will seek it out and go and read the first one and continue with the series themselves, as opposed to having them review every single book following afterwards. But, yeah, I don't know. I might see if she'd be interested in continuing with the series, and I'll pay her with every installment. I'll give that a look. But ultimately, I think this is definitely a good foundation, a good insight for people who might want to read it or who might want to avoid it. I will never forget the comment on Rachel's video where I scrolled down, and I think it was someone who commented before they'd even watched the video, because the thumbnail Rachel had made, which she told me about, was deliberately trying to poke fun. It was like, did I just read furry shit or whatever? And a guy typed in a comment and went, as a furry, I apologize. And I found that really funny. I don't think they watched the video because Rachel was like singing its praises for a lot of it, with fair critique. But anyway, I'm going on. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I certainly did, and I look forward to whatever fucking comes next. I was gonna say something, but I completely forgot. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.